Welcome to episode 2 of the VROOM podcast, hosted by myself, Wills Jones, and my co-host Simon Martell.
Hello.
So we're going to start this week off because there's no race to review. We'll just give a little introduction of ourselves, sort of who we are, why we got into F1, and other sports we're into type of stuff. So basically, I'm Wills. I'm going to school for sports studies with a concentration in media. I got into F1 when I was just a little kid with my dad watching races, early in the morning. You get up on the weekends as a kid, you get up early, and my dad was always watching the races. So I'd sit there and watch, the Michael Schumacher, Pablo Montoya years from my basement with my dad. So that's sort of what got me into F1. And then from Canada, so, other sports are hockey, love the CFL, football is a big one, really into basketball as well. Just general sports guy. What about you, Simon?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a recent fan of F1. I started maybe in the last 3 years, I would say. So right around like the introduction of the Halo is when I started watching, but I definitely a fan. And I'm from Montreal, meaning that I always kind of followed and kind of knew F1 was a thing, just since there's a race and everything, and it was kind of in the background. But every summer I wouldn't be around Montreal, so it wasn't really I wasn't really involved or cared. But then in the recent years, I've been around and I've been wanting to go. So I'm looking forward to finally being able to participate and to go in person when that comes back. Hopefully next summer, because I don't think it's gonna happen this summer. And apart from that, really big into football right now. Big fan of the Packers. I had that thought today, especially of how well that works out in my appreciation of the two sports, because right about when football finishes is when F1 season starts. So I'm almost always has something that I care about to watch. So that's pretty nice as well, especially considering how late the season started last year. So to have one that started kind of on time this year was fun, and really it was good to finally have F1 back on the screen. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
All right, and then I thought another good introductory thing would be your favorite team and driver combo of all time. So Simon, I'll let you start off with this one.
All right, yeah. So kind of like I just went about it where it was kind of, I'm a recent fan, still kind of learning about all the history from over the times, but definitely in recent history, at least what I can say is I really enjoyed the Max Verstappen, Daniel Ricciardo combo at Red Bull. I thought that was a pretty fantastic combo of really funny dudes. They had always the greatest PR material back in that day, and Ricciardo is a great character on the paddock. Maybe back in the day, I would say, I'm not sure about combo, but especially for racers, I gotta give out some love to my Canadian racers. So Gilles Villeneuve and then Jacques Villeneuve, both of them definitely probably the ones I'm the biggest fan of. Especially Jacques Villeneuve after his wins with Williams and everything, it was pretty special. So yeah, how about you, Wills?
So for me, like when I got like into F1 for a second time, like was sort of in 2010 to 2013, which was the Sebastian Vettel ruled the world to me. Yeah. Like that was the championship runs, all the Red Bull was the top team. It was the coolest for me. So I always, when I think F1, it's the screaming V8s with DRS was brand new, and it's it's Seb and Mark Webber at Red Bull. But I obviously growing up, like I can't discount Schumacher, and I think he raced with Rubens Barrichello.
Yeah.
And also, like, for me personally, looking back, like my favorite all-time driver is Ayrton Senna, and I don't think there's any better version of Ayrton Senna than Senna in the John Player Special Lotus.
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion.
It's definitely a legend among all. I don't know. I always find it interesting I would have loved to see, those old timers, those legends get in a car right nowadays and try to race, because of how technology advanced they are and how dependent on technology they are. I feel like they're probably a lot different to drive, and there's a lot more of the energy recovery system to take into account, the saving the tires. They had, at that time they had refueling, which is completely different from now. So it's very interesting to know. I don't know if there's just pure raw talent, or if somebody like Archer Senna, you take him and drop him into any generation of F1 and he would still dominate.
And I mean, you go back like far enough to a point where it was, you're doing a race on one set of tires and one tank of fuel.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think, those drivers, like, to manage one set of tires through a whole race, I think that's pretty impressive on like tires that thick as well.
Yes, yeah. But you gotta think too, like tires were built to last too, which is different than nowadays, where tires are
and
made.
Yeah, the Pirelli makes their tires to like wear out throughout a race, exactly. And like exponentially wear.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so I was gonna say, since there was no race on Sunday, we have a couple of topics that we kind of wrote up. We're gonna go through, but as you can expect, as soon as there's races again, so next week we're gonna be discussing about the race that's gonna be happening in Portugal. So I kind of cut you off. Sorry, Wills. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I was gonna say, do you want to move on to F1 fantasy and talk about our teams a little bit?
Oh yeah, let's do it. I want to just start off by saying how when you proposed to me the idea of F1 fantasy, I had no clue how it was going to work out. Last year was my first year ever doing a fantasy football, and already that took me a little bit of time to kind of figure out how that works and everything. But I did a whole season of fantasy football, so at this point I was very used to how that one worked and how that one worked out. So when you told me about the F1, I was like, okay, so how is that going to work out? Like, are we going to be drafting? Like, there's only 20 like racers, so who's going to be able to get Hamilton and just dominate? Like, I was a bit skeptical.
Yeah, no, when I heard about it personally, I was like, I'm really curious to like see how this works, because like everybody's going to have all of the same drivers, no?
Yeah. And so I guess for whoever's listening that doesn't know how it works, I think we should try to go through the basic kind of rules of how it works, how you make a team, and then how you score points. So how it works is that you're kind of making your racing team, if you want. So which is composed of 6 elements, 5 drivers and 1 racing team. So you're gonna have to choose your drivers, and at the start of the season, each driver had a salary, so that at the end of choosing each driver plus your team, you have like a salary cap. I'm not sure exactly the number. I think it was like 200 million or whatever the number. And so you have a cap, and you're supposed to choose drivers that have a certain price at the start of the season, so that everything fits under the cap. What was really interesting is that, for example, you can expect that Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion in the last like 7 years or 6 years, is definitely very expensive. So I thought I would build a team around him just to figure out. I mean, those are probably points, and so to give you an idea, just for me to be able to have Hamilton on my team and Mercedes as my constructor, I had to choose Mazepin, George Russell, and Schumacher, which were the top tier, cheapest racer I could have, just to be able to squeeze those guys into a team together. So that's kind of where the challenge for building your team is.
And I think too, they kind of tried to like, you can see where the F1 fantasy like really somewhat mimics like real F1, where they're like, we're giving you a cost cap of like 200 million and you have to build your team within that, which I found very interesting. I spent a good 3 hours today shuffling around my teams because I was trying to fill my like $100,000 gap.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. I had a little bit of a gap as well, since I had some players who like gain in value and others who dropped in value, so I had to try to figure out how I could balance that out. Kind of before we talk about why we built the teams we did and how, let's just kind of go through how the scoring works. So throughout a race weekend, I should say, every racer can score points. So there are going to be points like finish the race or qualified in the top 10, top 15, out qualified their teammate, didn't crash. I don't know. So tons of different actions that you want.
Different variables that lead
Yeah,
into the final score that they receive.
that give them a point. So at the end of the racing weekend, you have a total number of points that are awarded per driver, which are then added up into your team total since you have 5 drivers. So so then you add up your points, and then as well in the league we're playing, there's like some special events where you can have a turbo driver, so it's like your favorite driver for the race weekend that's going to have double the points of whatever he scores. And there's kind of a limit, so you can't put it on Hamilton or Verstappen, you have to go more midfield. And then there's also like events where you can triple the points of a racer for one weekend only through the season. So
yeah,
you have
in
to
2
think about
uses
that
throughout the
strategy as
season.
well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you score points. And the really interesting part, I think, as well, is that throughout the weekend, points are added up, but only yours, and you don't see you don't see across your league how other people's are scoring. So it's only at the end of the race on Sunday that you finally see where you rank, and you can move a lot. At least for now, after the second race, there was a lot of movement in our rankings, which was pretty interesting to see.
So I mean, if we're gonna talk about the teams, I guess you're ahead of me in the standings, so I'll let you go first.
So I kind of went in 2 different directions. So I built 2 completely different kind of ideas behind my teams. I kind of built one team of like a season I want, and then more of a realistic, I'll score points with this team. So so my dream team right there. So what I built was something. Was Verstappen initially. I really think this season he's going to be able to take a couple of wins like we saw already, but I really think this season Honda has pulled an incredible engine. I think they're competitive. So Verstappen was my first pick, and then I chose Stroll. I kind of got into the bandwagon of Aston Martin. I'm hoping that they can figure out whatever they've been going through. Norris didn't finish incredibly well at the end of last season, so I picked him again this season, and I'm very happy. He scored a lot of points for me so far. And then because you always have to shuffle around kind of your points, I went with the 2 AlphaTauri racers. So I have Tsunoda and Gasly, which kind of round up my top 5. And I'm pretty happy about that team. So far, it's been the team that's scored almost the most points. I'm second in the league by pretty close. So very happy with that team. And then my constructor is Red Bull. So that's kind of my top team. I'd say go Williams. There you go. So Wills, go with your first team right now in the rankings.
Yeah. So my first team in the rankings, I kind of went for the like how I thought I could score just the most points possible from like my drivers is where like most of my teams are set. Like I'm not too focused on the cars in any of my teams, especially in my top team. My top team is compiled of Verstappen, Bottas, Leclerc, Norris, and Sainz.
Oh, I like that. That sounds. I mean, you're really depending on Ferrari, which is surprising after last season's performance. But okay, those are definitely big names.
I think after like I've seen a couple races this season, I think Ferrari's kind of gotten a handle of that car. I think they're definitely in competition for best of the rest and have a shout at third, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think and I think they definitely can compete for podium, which is I think going to be making a really interesting season.
Yeah.
But you have to say the best part. Who's your constructor?
Oh, Williams.
Oh my
Hence
God.
why I built the whole team around drivers. It was like spending all of my money on the driver because
Yeah.
even you put a fast driver in a slow car, he can make the slow car fast. You put a slow driver in a fast car, that's still going to be a slow car.
Something interesting as well is how like points are counted. So you get a lot of points for passing drivers. So if you think you take maybe a back burner, somebody that doesn't start always like in the top 5, and is able to pass a lot of cars, that can score a lot of points. So for me, Tsunoda, for example, last racing weekend passed like 11 or 12 people, which scored a lot of points for me, even though
Yeah,
he like
they put
crashed
more
and lost some position. So that's always interesting to kind of think in the balance.
yeah, there's definitely more emphasis put on racecraft, and ultimately just finishing the race is what's most important. And so
Yeah.
they definitely like do reward that in the standings. And you can see like the drivers that crashed out in the races, or fell back positions,
Yeah.
they're over the chunk of money that they'll take out of your team budget is far reduced.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then like, I mean, you're racing with like Bottas and stuff, so I'm sure his value kind of dropped because he had a crash and ended low.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking right now at my second team. So the second team I built, I like kind of what I talked about earlier. I just I built around Hamilton, and I was like, okay, let's try to just get consistent point. Like I'm pretty confident. So I went Hamilton, Ocon, and then I just had to fill out the rest of the team with the budget that was left. So I had Mazepin, Schumacher, and Russell. So definitely not the best teammates, but it's still Hamilton. And then my constructor is Mercedes, which are pretty convincing and pretty trustworthy elements to score points. But if I'm looking right now at their current value, Hamilton dropped in value just because I guess he's not as dominant as everybody thought he was going to be, like he's been in the other season, as well as Mercedes. So their overall value of Mercedes has dropped relative to the other constructors.
And I think too, like if you look at Lewis Hamilton's most recent race, like it wasn't the same race we've been used to seeing from Lewis Hamilton. He had to work to get back onto the podium and really fight. Where we've seen other races where he just takes off and he's 2 minutes in the lead. So there are like the contributing factors of that, like racecraft and how well you perform during the race, not just how good your results are.
Yeah, it probably was a more entertaining race for him as well. Not
a little bit more
front
exciting
and pacing his tires.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then I guess the last thing. I guess do you want to tell me about your second team? How did you think of a different makeup or a different team?
Yeah, so I've got my second team. I did some edits to it today. It wasn't quite where I wanted it. So my second team, I've got Leclerc, Tsunoda, Russell, Verstappen, and Sainz. So leaning heavy on Ferrari again on that team in the driver's side, but I'm using Red Bull as my constructor. So hoping that I can get a good result from Max and Checo in their Red Bull machinery to bring up some of the points from that.
Okay. And then do you have a third team as well?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
My third team it's an okay team. I'm really not that excited about this one. We've got Perez, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Gasly, and Stroll with Ferrari as the constructor. I think this one's by far my most spread out team.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how it'll finish. I'm most stressed out about that one. That one I have the least certainty on.
Yeah, I think as well, like something that's really fun and that I really enjoyed that I haven't seen necessarily in other fantasy team is being able to do the turbo driver like we talked about. And that's kind of what really raised my team last weekend, was that I was able to turbo driver Norris, because I guess they still consider him midfielder even though he's been really performing. But with the performance he had last weekend, he made so many points because whatever he scored was double the points for my team. So that's definitely like one of the main reasons I scored so many points that last race weekend. So that was my turbo driver. And then That's probably the one I'm going to keep him on, just because he has such high upside and pretty high low sides as well. So I'm pretty happy with that. Who's your most like exciting turbo driver?
Um, I'd say the turbo driver I'm most excited about for this coming race in Portugal would be Carlos Sainz.
Mm,
I've made the turbo driver on my top team. I
yeah.
I really think, like, I looked back at his results from last year, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I really think he could make quite a splash at this Grand Prix.
Okay. Yeah. Um, hopefully. Okay. Well, let's move on from that then. Do you want to kind of give us maybe a bit of your opinions on why do you think he's going to make a splash? Why do you think that? Why are you so excited about Carlos Sainz?
Well, if we look at like just his results from last year in the Grand Prix, like, I mean, he only moved up one position, but he out qualified Lando and he out finished Lando in the Grand Prix. I just genuinely think, like, I really think Carlos is quite quick and has the ability in this Ferrari to really put in the work. And I'm excited to see the Ferrari McLaren fight and how that will turn out this season.
Yeah. And you know what? It's really funny because I've been going through watching Netflix like Drive to Survive, which I suggest to anybody who hasn't watched it yet. I think it's a great show, over dramatized by a lot. They definitely take some some
Artistic liberties.
some artistic liberties and some twist and make it a lot more exciting than it is, but very entertaining nonetheless. And I think it's interesting to kind of have those interviews with the team principal and all of them. And yeah, so far I'm really disappointed in Alpine. I thought they were gonna be contesting for that third place, and they're really not looking like it so far. So hopefully they can figure out whatever is plaguing them. I think their engine hasn't been really up to par in the last couple of years, but yeah. So that's definitely the team I think I'm the most, well, one of the teams, Aston Martin. But if you think about Aston Martin as a brand new team, then shouldn't expect too much. But yeah.
But even like, you can look at Aston Martin, like that the structure of that Aston Martin team has been in Formula One for a long time. Like, it was Jordan and then Spiker, and then it was Force India, and it's always stayed the same. So it's been in F1 since the late 90s.
No, I know it
So
was a joke.
the institute,
It's been there for a while.
the fabric it's based on, I feel like, has all the pieces
Yeah.
it needs to do well. It's just, whether the extra influx of funding from Aston Martin and Cognizant and BWT, all of their
And Lawrence
sponsors and
Stroll,
stuff,
yeah.
if they can really put all that to good use and make the team what it could be.
Yeah. Talking about kind of new rules, maybe of how things that have been kind of discussed a lot about last race weekend. If we look at maybe the track limits, if we remember from that first race weekend, if I'm not wrong, Max Verstappen passed Lewis Hamilton a couple of laps before the end of the Grand Prix, and he looked like he was going to win the race, and then he had to give that position back because the marshals decided that he passed by cutting a corner. And that kind of raised a lot of eyebrows because Lewis Hamilton cut that corner almost throughout the entire race. What do you think made them come to that decision?
Well, so in the technical briefings before each Grand Prix, it's stated to all the drivers and teams which corners are going to be regulated for track limits. So, Lewis Hamilton read over that document, went, okay, like, try and stay within the track limits as much as you can. Don't pass off track. But by the way, we're not watching turn 13 or whichever corner it was, which basically means do whatever you want at turn 13 until we tell you not to, right? Until somebody else complains about it, which, you heard Max go over the radio, like, Lewis is, breaking track limits at 13. Like, can we do that too? And, Christian, or I forget which way the communication went, but it was basically like, yeah, like, do it until we hear otherwise.
Yeah.
And then they heard otherwise, and it was give the position back, not, hey guys, don't like, I don't know. I feel like the decision, instead of, okay, stop cutting track limits now when Lewis Hamilton was obviously doing it all race. Like, I think there just needs to be more consistency on uh checking track limits. Like, don't just monitor one corner, here and there. Like, monitor all of them at the same time.
Yeah, and I think there's also kind of something to be said about just how those new tracks are built, so that when you are cutting those corners, it's almost like it's just a very wide like track at that
It's
point.
just
You
more
know,
track. Yeah.
compared to other tracks where you'd be in the grass, you'd be in gravel, you'd have kind of penalties, you'd be risking your car. These tracks, it's literally like, well, the only difference is like a line of paint. Then I think there's some blame or some responsibility to be put on just the track design itself, because especially when it's racing, I think that's the greatest part, and I think that's what makes racing interesting. If somebody's able to kind of go through the grass and they're squarely, but they're able to finish their
And you
position,
see
that's just
the
great
dirt and
racing.
everything come
That's
up. Yeah. I've
exactly,
always
that's
thought
what
that's the
everybody
coolest
wants.
part.
That's what's super exciting, and so seeing Max do that in kind of, you can imagine it would be the same way, where they were having a great battle. It was 10 laps before the end of the race. Max finally is able to go to the outside and take over Hamilton. But then, because it's such a such a highway out there, he was
Yeah,
maybe out of track, but he was just trying not to get contact and to pass Lewis. Like, I think at that point it's kind of a shame that like Max got penalized, because from his position as well, like I don't think it was necessarily the most like egregious like track limit violation ever.
yeah, no, and like I'm with you. Like, going off the track should be a penalty within itself. Doesn't, like, just that action should slow you down enough that
Yeah,
there doesn't necessarily have to be retributions for going off track.
yeah, exactly. And it especially since it wasn't like cutting a corner or whatever, it was just kind of got forced outside because of the racing. And so if he's able to keep
Yeah,
going and then come back in front, man, let them race. Let us watch this, because just seeing him kind of move to the side and let Hamilton pass again in front, it was just like, oh wow, great, great race.
oh, I know. I was screaming in my living room. My whole
Yeah.
family watches the F1 with me, and I'm standing there. What is he doing?
Yeah.
What? So, and I think, like, having, like, too, just if it's more like cut and dry on just what the track limits are, it also stops the week of backlash of people on the internet complaining and, oh, it's rigged for Mercedes and all like this and that. I think if they just have clear, concise rules that they always stick to, and you can't cut the track anywhere, then it makes the FIA actually seem fair and not like they play favorites.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But no, I definitely agree, and I think that's probably going to be one of the solutions, is to be in those driver briefings, just kind of really clearly say what is accepted and what is not accepted. And you kind of saw how they brought the hammer down the next race. Lando Norris got his like last lap completely cut because of track limits. So I guess that's kind of what we were getting. So yeah, Lando got his like really good lap that would have put him on top 3 cut. So he started from a bit farther back. At the end of the day, good for him. It didn't impact him too much, but
Yeah.
Hopefully,
And I think, like, Imola too is one of those tracks where there are very few places you can extend the track limits to gain time.
Yeah.
It's not like a Bahrain where it's all just concrete around the track. Like, Imola is a rather punishing track if you go off of it.
Yeah. At least what we're seeing from this year, and it's kind of our next topic, is that there is a lot of passing, and there's also not as straight of a domination as we kind of seen in the last 2 seasons. So if you remember, especially in the last seasons, as soon as Mercedes would kind of be outside of after the first couple of turns at the start of the race, if it was a Mercedes 1-2 in front, except if like there was a red flag and something happened to the Mercedes, you would expect that that was the end of the race pretty much. It would be Mercedes 1-2. So a big change this year was with some rules that were relevant to the underbody of cars, and that has affected Mercedes, and we see that so far. By that is also it has slowed them down, which is kind of, I guess it sucks for them, but has made up for much better racing.
Yeah, and I think too, like the aero changes were definitely aimed at slowing down the Mercedes concept, the Mercedes aero concept, which in turn has slowed down other teams that use that high rake, which is the back end of the car stands up more than the Red Bull does, and the Ferrari, which use a low rake, very low, sleek to the ground.
I think you're mixing it up. I think it's the opposite. So Mercedes has the high rake. No, sorry, Red Bull has the high rake, while Mercedes has the lower rake, but has the very complicated aero floors that have been kind of nerfed. And but I agree with on keeping on that subject. Like that's definitely kind of why you see, I think, Aston Martin struggling so much, since they were called the pink Mercedes last year, and well, the Mercedes copycat are struggling. If Mercedes struggling, what a surprise.
Yeah, and now, but Aston Martin are trying to challenge the FIA rule change, because part of their reasoning for taking all that downforce away from the rear of the floor was because the tires weren't developed enough and weren't strong enough to withhold the aerodynamic pressures, and they didn't think Pirelli would have time to develop a new tire during COVID, which subsequently they have been able to do. So Aston Martin now want the rules turned back to the way they were last year, because half of the rule change was stated as safety due to tires, and now the tires are strong enough. So Aston Martin's throwing a hissy fit to try and get the rules changed.
I mean, at this point, I guess they have to, right? They got played the same exact way last year with their brake ducts. So I guess they just figured out that that's the way the game is played. It's funny because they were saying a lot of things against people who protested last year, saying that, well, they're just bad engineers who messed up on their cars. But I guess what comes around it goes around, and they're getting the same treatment this year.
I also find the official quote from Christian Horner on Aston Martin challenging the official regulation change was, "Well, that's quite naive, isn't it?"
Yeah, I mean, so far though, I'm pretty happy. I think it's after 2 races, without talking too quick, but it's been a success. We've had some really good race. I think it's definitely not only only because of the aero rules, but still, it really gave us a good race. The podiums are changing. Some mid-tier teams are getting on the podium, which is just, at the end of the day, as a viewer, it's the only thing we can be really happy about. So we're gonna have to see how the season develops, but I'm very happy with the rule. Aston Martin, they're just gonna have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and I think too, Formula One has always been about, designing your car around the rules. So it's just, they'll figure it out halfway through the season. And that's what I think will happen.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. And man, I'm just hoping Vettel can remember how to drive at 1.2 during this season.
Hopefully, man. But he hasn't spun yet this year, has he?
No, that was a Ferrari special.
Exactly. So we're doing better than doing better than last year.
So another rule. Oh, go ahead.
So some other changes being made to the F1 sort of docket is a new race weekend schedule. So we've got now, they're introducing a sprint race qualifying on Sunday and moving on Saturday, sorry, and moving the Q1, Q2, Q3 qualifying to Friday afternoon, where practice 2 would usually be, and moving practice 2 to just before the sprint race on Saturday. Confusing enough for you?
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's pretty exciting. Of course, it's kind of you gotta be kind of apprehensive about mixing up the format of a sport like F1 that's been historic for so long, but it's gonna give us more racing. So I think that's at the advantage of any of the viewers, just more racing to watch, which is gonna be interesting to see. The sprint qualifying is gonna be much shorter, right, than the race. It's supposed to last maximum an hour, I think, or it was like
Yeah,
100
100
kilometers.
kilometers race
Yeah.
distance. Yeah.
So a lot less than an hour since they're racing more than 100 kilometers an hour. But yeah, so 100 kilometers, so probably not that many laps, which means that hopefully the whole groups is gonna be closer. There's gonna be much less of a separation, but the whole pack together. And then I'm also hoping that and I guess the one thing I'm not necessarily like very happy about was that those spring qualifying are going to be impacting kind of the points overall. So that's definitely going to be changing a lot of the dynamics because because then first place, second place, and third place of the spring qualifying gets point. I think it's 3 points for first place, 2 points for second place, and then 1 point
The
for
points
third
for
place.
the sprint qualifying actually go from first to eighth, starting
Okay.
from 12 points down to
Okay.
1 point for finishing eighth.
Well, okay, well there you go.
So they do have, it has opened up a bit more, but I think for me, what it would have been like this, I don't see how this is going to change the final qualifying order that much. I think maybe, you'll see some drivers with better racecraft work their way up higher, and that'll be good, but it's not going to change. Like, I still think you'll see Mercedes at the top, then Red Bull, then a Ferrari or a McLaren. I still think that's kind of how the qualifying will go. I think what would make the biggest difference is if the top 10 in the at the end of the Friday qualifying was reversed.
Okay.
I think that would be interesting, but that would
So
then
you would
open
want
up to
Mazepin to start off the sprint qualifying, make a massive crash, get like 10 cars out. Okay, nice.
Yes, NASCAR style. But of course, like if you announce that you're going to do a reverse grid race, then you're just going to have Mercedes sandbagging the whole time and, trying to start first so they can protect their car.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I don't think that would ever work, just because there's it's not, you don't have the incentive to finish first if you're not going to have the
there would have
same
to be
results.
points for qualifying high to justify it being reversed. I don't think that'll happen. I think it would be beautiful if there was reverse qualifying.
I think that the one thing really that kind of affects at the end of the day, this like the decision, what it affects is kind of I think the overall like idea of the sport. I think especially right now, like qualifying is, I find is one of the really interesting part of the weekend. Like for non-fans,
it's one of my favorite parts too.
For non-fans, I think not a lot of them even follows or care. But as you get into the sport, that's one of the first things you kind of start to learn to appreciate, and to kind of, you're on the edge of your seat. And I think it removes a lot of the whole of all of that by regulating it to a Friday that nobody cares about. And then everybody's just going to show up on Saturday, be like, oh, okay, this is the lineup. Okay. And then it's going to be probably similar for Sunday. Okay. Compared to right now, how it is, Saturdays, you have something to look forward to. You're looking at the qualifying, and they're gonna, for example, some people are gonna be doing some mastery stuff with their shitty cars. Like I'm thinking about Russell, who always does really great work with his
Mr. Saturday, George Russell.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now he's gonna become Mr. Friday, bro, because then he's gonna qualify high and just get past like he already does on Sundays. So I think that's the kind of one little bummer, but yeah, I'm split, because whenever we do get the races back in person, I'm really looking forward to going in person. And I think if I get the 3-day pass, and then you have something to look forward on Friday, then you go on Saturday, you see more racing, and then on Sunday you get racing. Pretty good deal.
It does
for
incentivize
any spectators.
It does incentivize going to every day of the Formula One weekend, instead of, okay, like Friday's kind of a write-off. You really want to go for Saturday, Sunday. So that obviously is more money in for Formula One. it opens up. There are going to be more people watching on Friday and Saturday, like selectively. So that's going to bring in more money, more chances for advertisers. So it's obviously a very big cash grab. But
Yeah.
then also for the Friday qualifying sessions for the races that'll be in North America, the time delay and the like time change and
Time
stuff
zones. Yeah.
will have it being the like in Europe, it'll be the after work crowd. You'll be able to go to the bar after work and watch
Oh,
Friday
that's like
qualifying.
that's
So
smart. That's
that's where,
smart.
yeah, it's all tuning for the European market.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward. I think we're gonna have 3 Grand Prix this year that's gonna have those rules. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to see how it works out. At the end of the day, I think it's gonna be good to see more racing. They are removing a practice, right? Or isn't there
So
used to be like
the
practice
practice
3?
gets shuffled around. Yeah.
Okay,
So now second practice on Friday is effectively replaced and turned
by
into
qualifying.
the qualifying session,
Yeah,
which then practice 3 becomes practice 2 as just a
in
little get
Saturday
out, warm up
morning.
your car before the race on Saturday
Yeah,
morning.
all
Yeah.
right.
And the tracks so far speculated to be hosting these new sprint races will be Silverstone, Monza, and Brazil. It was originally going to be
Okay.
Silverstone, Canada, and Brazil. Obviously, with the Canadian Grand Prix not happening, they moved it to Monza. And then
Has it been
there's
official? Because I think I read a news that there were still some hopeful people that for it to
I
be on
I
going on.
saw officially announced by Formula One that it was canceled.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you go. Okay.
And then there's some speculation if the Brazilian Grand Prix is going to go this year because they're having such a hard go with COVID
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah. Well, Silverstone is usually a pretty entertaining track, and then usually Hamilton does as well too. So hopefully he gets crashed out or something during the sprint race and starts from 20th. All right.
Oh,
I
Hamilton
guess
last a first
we have a
challenge. I'd
lot.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good for them, right? I kind of feel like I don't remember a time where McLaren were good or like dominant, but they definitely had a period of time where they were. And so it's kind of right now I see them as underdog, but they're still like one of the teams that with the most win in F1 history.
Do you know who Lewis Hamilton won his first championship
No,
with?
exactly. I know it was with
Yeah,
McLaren.
yeah, yeah. So it like they're a team like in my mind like they've always been my like number 2 team. It's been Red
Okay,
Bull, McLaren, Ferrari until recently. Aston Martin has topped the table thanks to Seb. I just kind of follow Seb around, but it
nice.
like I think McLaren now with their driver lineup, I think if Danny Rick figures out that car and gets on top of it,
They
they could
definitely
be a
have,
solid. They could be
yeah,
a. They're solidly, I think, at that point getting third. I don't know if the Ferrari is fast enough to get third. I think they can put up a fight for it. I don't know if they're fast enough to get third. And then all you really like, I think all McLaren really need to have a good shout is like 1 or 2 miracle races like we saw last year
yeah.
where a midfield team can kind of stack the podium up like Racing Point did. So I think some magical things happen. The F1 gods shine upon us, and I think McLaren has a shot, and I definitely think in development and where they're going and their drivers now and the momentum that team has, I think in the future they're definitely a good shot for a championship.
It'd be really entertaining to see them fight for that third place. I think they have one of the most talented duo of drivers right now. They have the young blood. They have Lando Norris, who's always been promising, but he's definitely like he's getting into his own right now, and he seems very comfortable with the car and the team, which is very promising. And then Ricardo is just he's a race winner. He's won before, and he's definitely just experienced now. So I think they have one of the really good combos up there. So I agree. I think they're a threat. I don't think they can win the title. Like I agree with you that they would need a lot of miracles. I like I think um I think Perez is
It'd be like
definitely have some.
solidly 2 races of both Mercedes and both Red Bulls crashing out.
Yeah, like that's the problem. And then
Yeah.
you're still gonna have like a, I think it's gonna be a fight for the championship this year between Verstappen and Hamilton, hopefully. And but the problem is that Mercedes are just such a dominant car, like every year. Like Bottas is not gonna fuck up every race. So and right now Verstappen like doesn't have a, his teammate hasn't been performing for the last 5 years. So
Yeah.
I think Checo has definitely some potential. He's looking like the most likely one to be able to take that second seat. But
I think he's
yeah,
Verstappen's
he's been
most
kind of
solid teammate since
he's
Danny Rick,
been
for
cursed.
sure.
He's been cursed so far with the second Red Bull seat, which is cursed, like everybody knows. And you'll have to he'll have to fight hard to break the curse.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add? Otherwise, I think we can kind of wrap it up soon.
No, yeah, I think that's it. We'll do a quick look ahead to Portugal coming up. So sort
Yeah.
of what are your race predictions for Portugal? Your quali and race top 5, let's say, off the top of your head?
Yeah, top 5. So I'll just go kind of off last week's performance. Not well, yeah, like the last racing weekend. We saw Perez out qualify Max. I'm really hoping that happens again because that's definitely going to be a good sign for Red Bull if it does. Um, Other than that, I think I think Ricardo's gonna outqualify. Oh no, that's not true. I don't believe that. Lando's gonna outqualify Ricardo. I think Stroll's gonna be top 10 again. Yeah, nothing too spicy. I think Bottas is gonna be top 3. I definitely think he's gonna fight back again, and he's gonna take the position his car kind of gives him, and he's still a solid driver. So I think Bottas is going to be in the top 3, and then Hamilton and Verstappen either or first and second.
I like honestly think the top 4 for the qualifying, or top 5 even for qualifying, could be the same as it was last year.
Okay.
For this race. Last year it was Lewis, Valtteri, Max, Charles, Checo. I genuinely think that could be the same top 5 this year.
Yeah, especially with Checo in a Red Bull.
Yeah. But also like Carlos Sainz qualifying 7th. Charles put that Ferrari 4th at this track last year. Man, I think Carlos could be a shout for the top 5 as well.
You know what? Bold prediction right here. I think last year Gasly was in the top 5. I think this year Gasly's going to finish in the top 5 again. There you go. I'm hoping.
All right. We'll wrap it up on that.
AlphaTauri has the engine. They have the Honda engine. They look good. They're 2 very young, ambitious racers. No, I think Charles Leclerc. Top 6.
I've never seen a
back.
Honda logo on an F1
6.
car that like looks so much like a Honda. Like I look at the AlphaTauri and I'm like, yeah, like that looks like a Honda out there with the white wheels and just the paint job on it. I'm like, damn, that's a Civic.
Man, can you imagine though how it must hurts for a racer? They switch from the promotional car from their Aston Martin Vantage to now a Civic
Type R.
And then you got Gasly in a Civic, but then you have Norris in a McLaren. Like,
oh man, but it gets worse for the Alpine and Renault drivers, eh?
I mean, yeah,
you have to drive like the Renault.
I'm so indifferent to the Renault. I think I was reading an article. Renault's gonna cap their cars, every single car in their lineup at like 160 kilometers, like electronically capped.
If it's electronically capped, you can probably hack the system.
Probably, but then it was the warranty or whatever. But yeah, it was like some bullshit like corporate like social stuff where it's like, well, we don't feel like cars that are gonna go on the highway should go faster than the speed limits, kind of.
Which is probably why they had Alpine take over the F1 team.
Yeah, because Alpine hasn't had any announcement yet for that thing. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Do you have the times for?
Oh, I do not have
tomorrow's?
the times that the race shall start.
I have it. So the race is going to be on
Beautiful.
Sunday, May the 2nd at 10 a.m., which is nice because usually it starts a bit earlier and I'm always in bed. So 10 a.m. I should be up. It's going to be fun. So everybody, I suggest you tune in. It's going to be an interesting one.
I think quali usually starts an hour before. I think quali.
Oh no, quali is like the other day. Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but it starts like an hour before on Sunday or on Saturday.
I don't know, but yeah. So thank you, Wills. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Hopefully you guys enjoy. If you have comments, write them down below. Let us know how you would like us to improve the format. Other than that, I guess we'll see you guys all next week, and we're going to be talking about the race that just happened, and hopefully somebody won and somebody lost.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.